So I make it before you.
Oh, no.
Which is good, I have bells. This is such a peculiar little gospel. Today you're going to get a twofer. One, you're going to get a little history lesson, and you're going to get a theology lesson. And then later on we'll have a continental brunch, wine and cheese, or wine and bread.
Yes.
So, let's see how bright you are. John the Baptizer was the voice that cries in the
Wilderness.
Yay! You're also bright. Give gold stars to everyone. You know, of course, you know, we did make a name change. You know, John the Baptizer is now his correct name. But it used to be John the Baptist. Of course, I went to school with John the Baptist in elementary. And I also went with Andy, the Episcopalian, Terry, the Presbyterian, and of course, with the twins, Michael and Bruce, the Lutherans. And of course, I was Robert the Catholic when I was young, little young. So it was the old days. But now John the Baptizer, we know him as prophet. This voice who cries in the
Wilderness.
Well, you know, ancient Jerusalem, or Judea and Samaria and Galilee didn't have, well, you know, the Jerusalem Herald or the New York or the New Roman Times, but they had a prophet. And as we learn, prophets have a tendency to say hard things, truth. We know who John is. You know, remember we have this image of John in the camel hair cloak, you know, basically wore somewhat like a caveman outfit, you know, on one shoulder, the other shoulder bare, you know. And, you know, pretty good looking, except for he had very matty hair. But, you know, that's if you like that type. But, and John was preaching, and he made a big splash in the religious scene at that time. Because thousands of people came out to him to hear him preach. And he was a fiery preacher. And be baptized by him in the Jordan River. But he also had a message that irritated somebody. He called sin what it was, sin. Evil what it is, evil. And he didn't have a lot of mercy in his sermons. He was bringing this the stick, not the carrot. That's John. Let's look at some of the other people in our gospel today. Well, Herod, he's not the Herod that we think of the infancy narratives. This is not Herod the Great. That was his daddy. And we'll just call him Herod Antipas was his actual name, but we'll just call him Herod Jr. Now, Herod Jr. grew up in a family, if you can imagine Herod the Great as your father. Okay? Most of you would not be alive. Well, we won't be alive today, but you would not even be living too much in his time either. He had a bad tendency of killing his children whenever he thought they were getting a little bit too unruly. He had a bad tendency of it, and he had lots of children. So he wasn't really too worried about that part, I guess. But Herod the Great was not exactly what I want to call the daddy that you would like to have. You know, he's more likely to chop off your head rather than give you a new car. So, if we can imagine Herod Jr. grew up with this. And so, you know, he was constantly he was able to survive out of his family to succeed his father as king of Judea. And so what happened is, so he has this little, I would say, he doesn't really basically not much different than his father, though his father had a greater body count than he did. But that was Herod. And of course, Herod basically also had a little problem that this is what John the Baptist baptizer gets brought into, is that he decided he liked his brother Philip's wife a lot better than his. So he took Herodias as his wife. And of course, basically, since his brother was still living, he couldn't invoke the old Levitical law that, he had to raise up children to his brother's memory. So basically, he was committing not only adultery, but he was also committing, various other sins against the family unity with his sister-in-law. And of course, what happened, John the Baptizer had this very strong message. And he was proclaiming the righteousness of God. And that all people should stand before God and realize we are sinful. And that we need God's saving grace. Thank you, Donna. Donna's keeping me on time here. But this wonderful, he preached this wonderful message, which is, we'll find out how wonderful that is. But this wonderful message, but of course, if you're not able to hear the wonder, it's not just condemnation, but it's also the mercy that is being extended. Herodias did not hear that message. She didn't hear the mercy. She heard that she was a sinner and that she didn't like being called out in public like John was doing to her. And so she hated him. And she wanted him dead. She was a good, first century queen type of thing, off with her head. The Queen of Hearts had nothing on her. Well, if you look at it, what happened is, then we know how events spread around a little bit. Then, of course, we have the wonderful birthday party that Herod decided to give himself. And he very lavishly gave himself this wonderful party, invited all the people. And somewhat, I would say, we know the daughter came to dance. Well, as you know, she came to dance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have the 8th bell, so I can be modest. But she danced a wonderful dance called the Dance of the 7 Bells, which basically turned, I would say it was a great crowd pleaser. And so Herod was prompted to give basically